Hi guys, this is Andy with WebGardener.com, and today we're going to be going over game objects and classes. So let's just jump right into it. What is a class? Well, according to Wikipedia, a class is an extensible program code template for creating objects, providing initial values for state, and implementations of behavior. Right, so that's pretty clear. Let's see if we can't make that a little clearer. So imagine we've got a box, right? And we're going to go ahead and say this is our object. You know, in object-oriented programming, we're going to define these objects so that we can basically make a whole bunch of them and we can reuse them. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to define this object. So maybe we give it things like, you know, a name, age, maybe we need its location or the weight of it or things like that. Well, that's good. Now we've defined some information about it, but what about how does it work? Maybe we've added some other things like how it walks, how it climbs, you know, what to do when it's running or swimming or things like that. Well, this right here is what a class is. We have simply defined an object, and inside of this object we have definitions that explain all of these things, which gives us basically variables or information that is tracked. And then we have methods or functions. And these are the processes that actually provide functionality, or as Wikipedia likes to call it, implementations of behavior. So the question that we have then is, what about game objects in Unity? Is a game object a class? Well, as a matter of fact, it is. Game objects, in fact, are the base class for all entities in a Unity scene. This means that in your inspector, or better yet, in your hierarchy, in the user interface of Unity, anything that is listed there has the game object class. However, we have to keep in mind that all of these inherit from the object class. And the inheritance actually is extremely important when we start getting into C# because that means that we can expand on our code. But real quick, before we can get into that, we need to understand inheritance. So let's take a look at this. So let's go back to our game object, and we've got this object. Now Unity's documentation is saying that we are inheriting from an object. And what that means is, let's say we've got this object, and inside that object, we've got all these definitions. We've got variables, we've got methods and things defining what object is. What we need to do is we need to take all this object stuff and put it into our game object. And that's exactly what we do. What we say in programming is that the game object inherits from object. So that means that when a game object is produced in Unity, it takes a copy of the object variables, definitions, and methods, and all of that, and puts it into that instance of our game object. Now, one of the other things that a lot of people don't realize is that all of the components which are added to game objects in the inspector are also classes. Some examples here, let's say we create a cube in our 3D scene and we give it a rigid body with a collider. Well, all of those components are actually classes defined by Unity. So the mesh filter, mesh renderer, collider, rigid body, you know, those are just examples of classes. But that means everything from cameras to the user interface elements like a text box or a panel to materials and how things work in there. All of that are classes. Okay, so I've loaded up the standard assets example project that is free to download from the asset store. And basically just wanted to go over, I created a blank scene, and you can see that we've got two game objects in here. We've got a main camera object and we have a directional light object. Now, again, if we think about the code in the background, what we've done is we've defined a class called main camera. And this class is inheriting from the game object class, and it's also inheriting from the object class. But notice all of our components. We've got a transform, we've got a camera, we've got a GUI layer, flare layer, audio listener. Remember I said that all of these are classes? Well, that means that our main camera object is also inheriting from the camera class. It's inheriting from the GUI layer class, the flare layer class, and the audio listener class. The difference here, of course, if we take a look at the directional light, it is inheriting from GameObject, because remember, all objects in a scene have to inherit from that, and that is also inheriting from the object class. But in addition, the directional light is inheriting the light class as well, which is giving it the functionality here. Now, the beauty of this inheritance is that as we add components, Unity's engine will basically change the background code for our game object to inherit from whatever new component, aka class, we're adding to it, which allows us to expand the functionality of GameObject very, very easily, which makes this actually very powerful. Now, when talking about scripts and C#, what we're actually doing here is we are defining a new class. And what's happening is, even though this class is now being defined, this class is now being inherited by our game object. So directional light is now inheriting from the test script class that I made. We'll get into the actual code of this next time when we start talking about variables and things of that nature. But I really hope this kind of helped to define the differences in understanding of what a game object is versus what a class is. So I hope this has given everyone an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the Unity engine and about defining the differences between a game object and a class. If you found it informative and it helps you out in any way, please go ahead and hit that like button for me. And don't forget to subscribe so you can catch up on all of my latest tutorials and get them as I get them posted. And until next time, thanks for watching.